So, welcome. Today we are continuing our series on the hero in the mirror, which, as I disclosed to you last week, is you. Today I want to talk about the power of imagination. So, the story goes that during the heresy trial of Joan of Arc in 1431, I bet you did not know you were going to be hearing about Joan of Arc, the inquisitor said to her, "You say God speaks to you, but it's only your imagination." And she responded, "How else would God speak to me, if not through my imagination?" What other way does God speak to us? What other way would Spirit speak to us? But in the way that resonates best with us, that calls to our dreams, our highest aspirations, our absolute best. There is no other way that Spirit speaks to us other than through our creative, our imaginative faculties. The power of imagination is that faculty that enables us to take those whispers of Spirit and shape them into vision, into reality, and the actions that give our lives meaning and joy. Charles Fillmore wrote that God gives to His image the power to express all that He is. Isn't that wonderful? God gives to His image, us, the power to express all that He is. For Fillmore, our imagination was indeed divine mind thinking through us and then taking shape through us. What an amazing power that is, a wonderful capacity, what a wonderful marriage that is, to take our humanity and use our creative faculty to express God here on earth. What a perfect melding of the divine and us to express as the hands and the feet and the voice of Spirit here on earth. So last week we explored Joseph Campbell's model of the hero's journey. We explored that each of us is called to our own hero's journey of awakening and discovery, leaving the known and the familiar and venturing out to slay our own dragons, our challenges that lead us to greater growth, wisdom, reward, and understanding. So what was the roadmap we used? Remember, the roadmap is entitled Follow Your Bliss. Follow your bliss to your soul's highest adventure. So what is the energy that powers us on that journey? It's our imagination. It's our ability to creatively put into form the inspiration that Spirit gives us. It provides our inspiration at the beginning, and on the journey it continues to supply hope, incentive, and vision as we travel, even through the adversity that invariably hits us on our hero's journey. None of us would take a step on that journey without the power of our imaginations to keep us going, without the vision of our imagination to keep us going. Look at Joan of Arc. Okay. Born into a peasant family in 1412, at the age of 13, she began hearing those whispers of Spirit. She began getting visions from God telling her to support the French king, Charles VII, and throw England out of France during the 100 Years' War. So what did she do? She took those whispers, she turned it into an entire vision of how she should proceed. She left her farm, she put on men's clothing, which back then was very bad for women. I was reading about her heresy trial. This is not going to be a history lesson on Joan of Arc, even though I'm such a goober, it might turn into that. And part of the reason that she was burned for heresy is because she wore men's clothes. God, I'm so glad I wasn't alive back then. I wouldn't be standing here. But having said that, she put on men's clothes. She went to war. She turned the tide of the war. At the Battle of Orléans in 1428, she was later captured by a pro-English French bishop and burned at the stake. Her courage and her commitment and her continued pursuit of that vision were legendary and changed world history. When she died, she was 19. Amazing. Her inspiration was divine, but it was creative imagination that gave her the roadmap and the commitment and the courage to keep on that path. So think about your own imagination. Okay, so maybe none of us are going out and changing world wars and changing the tide of history. Who knows? Some of us might. But think about your own imagination. Think about the places it has taken you over the course of your life, about the vision and the hope and the excitement it has given you. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I used to read books under the covers by flashlight. Did anybody else do that? Things that just powered my imagination. They gave me stories of kings and princes and battles and adventures, heroism and courage. They just expanded my universe 100-fold. They introduced me to new worlds. They gave me visions of what life can be. And not that I was going to go be a king or a prince or even a princess, but they gave me greater visions of what my life would be if I acted like that, if I took that courage and just made it my own, if I just stepped out on paths that might scare me, but that which still called to me. And it's not that they were instructive. It wasn't that they taught me 3 steps to being a hero. They inspired me. Think of that word, inspire. I just breathed in vision and hope and courage and possibility. So what child doesn't think that he or she is going to change the world? What does it take for us to stop thinking that? We grow up. Somebody tells us it's not realistic. And we take that in and we believe it. We have to stop believing that. Stories inspire us. Our imaginations inspire us to see the change that is possible and believe that we can do it. So tomorrow is the beginning of Passover, April 10th, one of the most significant holidays for Jews around the world. This year, Passover begins tomorrow and it ends on April 18th. Passover, like Easter, is based on the lunar calendar. It's based on the first full moon after the vernal equinox, just like Easter. Passover celebrates the departure of Jews from captivity and exile in Egypt and the beginning of their own hero's journey under Moses to the Promised Land. So Passover Seders on the first night, they involve the telling of that wonderful story of journey and liberation and transformation. And how do they begin? They begin with the smallest, youngest child who can ask, posing the ceremonial question, why is this night different from every other? That's how the traditional first night of Passover Seder starts. Why is this night different from every other? And so the story is told, again, every year. Now the purpose of Passover is not just to commemorate that story. It's not just to remember this ancient story. The purpose of Passover, when you tell the story, is for Jews to internalize it, for the hearers to feel it again, to take that journey again, to experience the fear of what last week we called, what did we call it? Dislodging. Remember during the hero's journey, when you first step away from what is known and familiar, you are dislodged. You are set off on a course to a place you do not know. The flight into the desert, the uncertainty, the not knowing, the fear, the questioning, where will I be, how will I end up, and ultimately the deliverance to a new beginning. It's not just to hear it, it's to do it, because it leads to a personal transformation. Every year it reminds the hearer that we are on our own journey. That's the purpose of ritual. That is why we do it again and again, not just because it's a nice story to tell, but because it reminds us why we are here and what we are doing, and that we are on that same journey of dislodgement and fear and transformation and deliverance. And every year that's the purpose of telling that story. It's not a dry ritualistic history that we celebrate from 33 centuries ago. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, who until 2013 was the chief rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregations of the Commonwealth, taught the following. He wrote, "We don't just remember. We reenact, eating matzah, the unleavened bread of affliction, tasting maror, the bitter herbs of oppression, and drinking 4 cups of wine, each a stage in what Nelson Mandela called the long walk to freedom." And it all begins with that question asked by a child. Why is this night different? And he writes, "I can still picture in my mind those nights long ago when I was a child. They gave me my first induction into the ideals I've tried to carry with me into my adult life. Above all, a sense of fellow feeling with others who suffer, eating their own bread of affliction." It gave him empathy, compassion, and understanding. He went on to write, "I think of a friend of ours who, hearing about the earthquake in Haiti, managed to get there quickly and found people desperate for water. He goes on to describe how this person provided a 3,000-gallon container, then finding that that was not enough, got on his computer, emailed 200 people, and by the end of it, when he left, he'd provided a water supply for 300,000 people until the infrastructure could be repaired. He tells another story of another friend, a woman in New York, who was watching a documentary about the plight of orphans in Rwanda 10 years after the massacre. This woman thought immediately, I'm Jewish, I'm supposed to help. Isn't that great? I'm Jewish, I'm supposed to help. And so she began contacting people who had experience with child survivors of the Holocaust, and within a few years, they had constructed a youth village housing 750 young people in Rwanda, teaching them agricultural skills and computer skills, and training them to become leaders who could go on to help others. He said, these are small acts perhaps, but adult outcomes of the story of Passover that taught us as children that the world doesn't have to be the way it is. The world does not have to be the way it is. Just like Sydney said in her prayer, it doesn't have to be this way. We can change it. The hungry can be fed. Slaves can go free. We can become God's partners in the work of redemption. Never underestimate the power of a story to enlarge the moral imagination. Because that's how we think. We think through stories. We think in images. We get inspiration through the pictures that come into our minds through these stories. Our imaginations have the power to literally change our lives. Charles Fillmore taught, what a man imagines he can do, he can do. If you imagine you can do it, you can do it. He taught that those whispers of spirit, of inspiration come to us through our intuition, those aha moments when a thought simply appears out of nowhere. I know you've all had those, I have. You're just kind of driving along and wham, there's the thought. What carries it forward? Our imagination grasps that idea and gives it form. Our imagination is our faculty that ensures that that whisper, that little slim idea, doesn't simply float away. We give it shape and form and life through our creative faculty. Our imagination gives it legs. Our will and our belief next give it substance, making it manifest. This is Law of Attraction 101, but it would never happen without our imagination. In his Edinburgh lectures on mental science, Thomas Troward taught that imagination is our creative function. It takes that little whisper and gives it life and enables us to carry it forward. So as I was researching this talk, this is the fun part, I spent a good bit of time finding out more about one of the greatest thinkers and creators ever, certainly of our time, Albert Einstein. Literally, I'm watching videos and talks and reading about Albert Einstein. I love this job. This is fun stuff. I was drawn into his story because Albert Einstein is the poster child for the creative use of our imagination. He just absolutely is. You may not know that when Einstein was an undergraduate, he was not seen as anything special. It's not like the kid was 10 and people go, oh, there's Einstein. He cut class. He didn't finish his work. His teachers thought he was a complete slacker. When he graduated from undergraduate, he couldn't even get a job teaching. He had to go leave Germany, travel to Bern, Switzerland, and become, as everybody puts it, a lowly patent clerk. It's not just a patent clerk, he's always a lowly patent clerk. Anyway, his job was sitting there reading dozens of patent applications a day. So what did that job, we should thank God he got that job. What did it do? It gave him time to think. It gave him time to just let his mind go and let his mind daydream. It was when he was a patent clerk in 1905 that he had what has been called his annus mirabilis, his miracle year. He published 4 papers, including the paper including what's been called the world's most famous equation, E equals mc squared. He also talked about photoelectricity. He also gave his special theory of relativity. He did 4 other things, which I'm frankly not, as a theater major, not going to explain to you. But it was an amazing year. So how did Einstein have the spark that revealed to him these truths? He just sat and thought. He let his mind wander. He used his imagination. Now, you and I would call it daydreaming, but because he was Einstein, he called it thought experiments, which sounds way more respectable. But that's what he would do. He would introduce an idea, a premise, a predicate, and then he would just let his mind go without boxes, without limits, without rules, just where it went. So for his special theory of relativity, what did he imagine? He imagined what it would be like to ride a beam of light. How cool is that? He just put it in his mind what it would be like to ride a beam of light. And as he thought, equations would come into his mind, images would come into his mind, mass and energy and speed, and out of that, he developed his special theory of relativity, which has to do with gravity, and I'll stop there. For his theory of general relativity, what images did he use? One of them was a man falling off a building. The man became weightless. He then put the same man inside an elevator, and they both fell, and they were both weightless, but they moved at the same relative speed. That gave him his theory of general relativity. Just imagine this going on in this guy's head. Matter and energy, he understood, interact with the space-time continuum. He's the first one who even thought of a space-time continuum. We now realize that they are interrelated, that they interact, that it's not just space and time, it's space-time. He obtained revolutionary insights about the curvature of space and realized that they were interdependent. He was famous for being able to just sit and think for hours. He would look out the window and just think. When was the last time he did that? Just look out the window and think. He'd put together mathematical equations in his head. He'd daydream about relationships between mass and energy and velocity, or he would just let his mind wander. If he got stuck on something, he'd get up and take a walk. Or he would play his violin. He once said that Mozart's music was so pure that it seemed to have been ever present in the universe, waiting to be discovered by the master. That's just beautiful. That almost brings me to tears. Isn't that beautiful? Just waiting to be discovered by the master. He also spent hours going through mathematical equations, writing in books, crossing them out. If it didn't work out, he'd turn the notebook upside down and write them another way. He'd throw the notebook away. He'd get a new one. He just did whatever followed his imaginative impulse to get to where he wanted to get. He once said, "I want to know God's thoughts in a mathematical way." That's what he was looking for. He was looking for a mathematical way to express God in action in the universe. That's amazing to me. So let's think. What if Einstein had been sitting in his office, gazing out the window with the spheres of the universe dancing in his head, equations morphing through, exploding like a kaleidoscope of imagery and math and algebra. He's sitting there just holding it all together, and his supervisor, "Albert, what are you doing? You're not doing anything. Get to work. You're so unproductive." Okay, what if he himself had said, "My God, I'm not getting anything done. Look at all these patent applications. I'm not being productive at all. I've got to get to work." Where would we be? We probably would not have quantum anything at this point, because he was being wonderfully productive. He was doing the best he could do, the most he could do with the faculties that he had. Thank God nobody came in and started yelling at him to get back to work. He was using the power of his imagination, cultivated and focused, to come up with mysteries of the universe that nobody could imagine and nobody could envision. So let me ask you this. Do you ever just sit and let your mind wander? Do you ever just value the time you spend just thinking or playing with thoughts in your head? I don't, but I've really decided to start trying because it's valuable time. What do? If I have 5 minutes of silence, I'm probably not going to sit there and think. I'm going to put in an audio book because, by God, I should be learning something. I'm going to read something. I'm going to check my email. Diversions, distractions. Sometimes you have to do that. And sometimes if you're driving along, you have 3 hours, it's a good idea to listen to something. But we miss those opportunities to take that time, to just use our creative energies and let our minds wander. Imagination is the font of all creativity, and we miss out on so many opportunities to do it. We think it's unproductive, especially in the West. Whenever we're sitting doing nothing, what do we berate ourselves for sitting there and doing nothing. We need to maybe spend a little more time sitting there and doing nothing. So how do we cultivate our imaginations? How do we start? First off, we just get behind the notion of play. We get behind the notion of getting rid of the rules, getting rid of the shoulda, woulda, have to. We just let our minds play. I went to a kids' party years ago when my kids were small. And, you know, that was back in the day when we were growing up. We thought play was like a street and a ball. Remember? We played kickball. We would turn it into fun things. We'd spend the day just out playing, doing whatever struck our minds. At this kids' party, when my kids were small, somebody had hired an adult to instruct them how to have fun. Literally, I thought, oh my God, what a tragedy. I was almost like, get out of here, but it wasn't my party today. But anyway, the kids were all lined up and they had to follow this regimen and kick the ball and run here and run there, and I thought, oh my goodness. You know, when I look at kids' toys, have you ever noticed with kids' toys, there are so many of them that there's only one thing you can do? You can plug it in and it does this one thing? That's crazy. Kids' toys should be like, take this shape and make it whatever you want. Take this drawing and do whatever you want with it. Use your imagination. Right now there's so much opportunity that is lost when kids are not asked, or when adults are not asked, to take their imagination and just run with it. So we need to get a little bit more behind the notion of play. We need to release the tyranny of outcome, predictability, and rules when we are letting our minds wander. Einstein didn't worry about that. He didn't say, oh, this has to look like X. He just let X appear after he let his mind just go. After he imagined riding that beam of light. He didn't know where it was going to go or what those rules would look like. He waited for his mind to tell him. We have to just let our minds and our creative faculty go where it goes. As we get older, more experienced, more realistic, what a word, we forget that we have the innate faculty of creativity and play, and that it will lead us places that we have not yet gone. We have to cultivate it and value it. It's the ability we have that brings us the most joy and directs us to our soul's highest adventure. So let me close with a quote from George Bernard Shaw. He said, "Imagination is the beginning of creation. You imagine what you desire, you will what you imagine, and at last you create what you will. But it all starts with your imagination." So let's take these thoughts into meditation.